not our prosecutor Wade, out of social inequalities, income inequalities.
All right, that's Los Angeles District Attorney George Gascon making his clear view in January about rising crime in that city, saying prosecuting people isn't the way to fix crime. Critics call him the progressive non-prosecutor. Now, he wants to stop telling victims that their attackers are up for parole because it may trigger them. He says it's now up to the corrections department. We're still trying to figure out how abandoning victims will solve any kind of social and income inequality issues, but it's not surprising, perhaps, that Gascon is facing recall just months after San Francisco voters booted Chesa Boudin out. They're part of a long list of prosecutors under fire, including district attorneys in Portland, Albuquerque, Milwaukee, Chicago, St. Louis, Manhattan, and Boston. In Philadelphia, state lawmakers, Republicans, say they're going to impeach DA Larry Krasner. The city saw the most murders on record last year, yet conviction rates are down big. For example, Krasner's office has dismissed 66% of all violent offensive cases, 53% of all firearm possession cases. That's just this year. While voters are starting to turn on progressive prosecutors, the social justice advocates are not. We bring in Dr. Desmond Patton, professor of social policy at the University of Pennsylvania. Professor, I appreciate you being with us in explaining this. Help me understand, what is the value of these policies that would generically be called those of the woke prosecutor movement?
Interesting phrasing. Thank you for having me. I think from my perspective, what's most important is that we are considering those that are most vulnerable and most impacted by these policies. And I think in this particular case, the victims are those who are most vulnerable. And that's why I think, what we really need to be talking about is infusing their thoughts, their opinions, their perspectives to inform the types of policies that we're seeing going forward.
Okay, so is it working?
I think that's yet to be determined. I think there are a lot of factors at play here, and I think this is a very complicated answer. Yeah. What I would like to see is more research to evaluate whether or not having these policies is actually helpful for all.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. But it's, at some point, how many lives, how many shootings, how many people killed above the norm in record numbers is too many? Is the cost too high for whatever good might come?
That's a really good question, but I think that if we're really going to tackle violence and gun violence prevention, we really need to get back to the root of violence. And we're in a pandemic, we continue to need resources, we continue to need to think about housing and poverty and healthcare. All of these things remain true. And so I think really the question should be focused on the structural conditions that have shaped where we are today.
Right, but in the meantime, while we're dealing with the structural conditions that we just showed video out of Philadelphia where you live, 10-year-old boy and 14-year-old boy, teenagers, beat a 73-year-old man to death with a traffic cone. There is a condition of lawlessness in that city brought about by these policies. How do you say to the family of that 73-year-old man, hey, gee, we're sorry Grandpa died, but he died because of this greater good of social justice is going to come?
This case is very sad and it's very heartbreaking. And I also think that we continue to need to develop supports and resources to prevent these types of incidents from happening. The young boys that committed this act, this act could have been prevented had there been enough resources in the city of Philadelphia to support them with alternatives.
So the answer is just continue to spend more money, but not lock up bad guys.
I think what we need to do is really focus on identifying the problem, and the problem is not one note. The problem is structural. It's a long-standing historical issue.
Right. Okay. Fine. There's root causes of violence, if you want to call it that, but there's also people who commit violence. Right. There's 1,666 cases of firearm possession, of which 53% weren't prosecuted. There were almost 6,000 shootings, only 7% resulted in convictions or guilty pleas. 1,200 shootings this year, no one's charged in 79% of those cases. How is this affecting the root cause of violence or helping it? How does not prosecuting people fix the root cause of violence?
I think there's lots of ways in which we can think about committing violence and who should be at fault here. I also think that we should think about
I got to stop you for a second. So when you say who's at fault, so the people who pull the trigger of the gun aren't at fault for the shooting?
It is a multifaceted issue. It can't just be one note. There are structural conditions that shape how and why we have the violence that we see today. So just focusing on individuals is not going to solve the problem.
I got to stop with it. We can't agree that if you shoot somebody or that if you're a felon in possession of a gun, you should go to jail.
I think that, again, we need to take this from a holistic perspective. It's not as simple as you're making it out to be. It's a complicated situation.
Okay, I got that. So go ahead. Should we not put the person in jail who pulls the trigger and kills somebody?
I think that we should make sure that we have the right people at the table to inform how these policies are carried out. And I think that there's a lot of work that needs to happen with law enforcement. There's a lot of structural conditions that are at play here that we need to fix and solve as well.
Professor, I appreciate that. I just come back to this, and I'll give you the last word here, but how many lives are too many for the experiment to continue?
This isn't an experiment. This is a holistic perspective, and we don't want anyone.
Well, it is an experiment. It hasn't been tried before, has it?
Well, there's lots of experiments. There's an experiment where we have allowed structural conditions to affect Black and brown communities. And I would love to see you talk more about that as well.
Aren't the Black and brown communities the ones that are disproportionately affected by this rise in violence?
And they're disproportionately surveilled as well.
Well, that happens to be true as well. We'll leave it there on a point of agreement. It's good to see you, Professor. We'll have you back.
Thank you.
Yeah,
thank you so much.
Thanks for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to subscribe. Click the red button to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.